Okay, good evening everybody and welcome to this meeting of Braintree District Council's Planning Committee today, the 1st of October. I'd like to, as I have no announcements, to move straight to apologies for absence amongst our members. I have apologies from Councillor Tom Diamond, who has not appointed a substitute, Councillor Andy Mundy, whose substitute is Councillor Jackie Pell, and Iona Parker, who is the chair of this committee, who is substituted by Councillor George Prime. I am David Holland, Vice Chairman of this committee, and I am, as I've said, standing in for Iona Parker. Are there any other apologies? Thank you. That being the case, could we move straight to declarations of interest, which are to declare the existence and nature of any disclosable pecuniary interest, other pecuniary interest, or a non-pecuniary interest relating to the items on the agenda, having regard to the Code of Conduct for members and having taken appropriate advice where necessary before the meeting. Councillor Pell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've just taken advice from Alison Webb, and she advises me that I have an NPI in land east of the High Street, as I am a member of Howster Town Council who have discussed this item, and I have been advised to leave when it's discussed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pell. Are there any others? Thank you very much. In that case, we would ordinarily move item 3 to the minutes of the last meeting. I'm afraid those minutes are not available, so they will be carried forward and voted on at a future meeting. Item 4 is public question time. There are no registered speakers at the meeting this evening to speak on general topics, and that being the case, we will now move to item 5, planning applications. The first item application this evening, item 5A, is application number 2203367, full land adjacent to Unit A, Eastways in Whittam, and we have received a statement from Mr. Bill Jenkins of Jenkins Design Services pertaining to this application. Mr. Jenkins originally was going to speak, but he has not attended, but the document he's provided has been distributed to all council members, and I'm sure they will have read all of that. That being the case, I would like to invite Jack to make the presentation of this application. Thank you.
Chairman, sorry, before you proceed, could you just check with Councillor Beavis that's joined the meeting if she has any interests to declare?
Okay, Councillor Beavis, do you have any interests to declare?
Thank you, Alison, and thank you, Chairman. I have no interest. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman.
In that case, we'll turn back to Jack. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. The application is 22/3367/FUL for the erection of a commercial unit, use class B8, which members may be aware is storage and distribution use, together with access, parking, landscaping and associated works. I want to preface the application to note the prefix of the application is 2022. It's an application that has been in for some time with the authority. During the life of the application, in which we've received revised plans, particular ecological information has become apparent, which is detailed in the committee report. Officers have got the scheme to a level that they considered acceptable, as I'll go through in this presentation. However, the ecology information, as I'll explain, required a solution which we've been able to negotiate through section 106. So it's been a long application, but one which us, the developer, the ecologists and place services have been involved with. I'd like to also say within the published committee report on page 6, there's a slight discrepancy where the site is, as you see it there, the entirety of that site is hashed. That's just a unfortunate drafting error. The actual site that we're dealing with is that edged in red on the application screen, on the presentation screen, sorry. So the site occupies a portion of the Eastways industrial site within Witham. The site falls within the Witham Town Development Boundary as well as a designated employment policy area within the adopted local plan. The site, as you can see, is surrounded by industrial buildings. To the northwest of the site is a train line, and further just off the screen to the northwest is residential development around Mulberry and Elderberry Gardens. This is the existing site with topography which is uneven underfoot, but as proposed, the development would occupy a large portion of the site with the following features indicated: parking along the top of that image with an access to the right hand side, a service yard area on the right hand side of the building, and then the building itself demonstrated in grey on the left of the red line boundary. The solar panels on the roof plan are noted. There are other forms of infrastructure maybe not able to show given the scale of the plan, including an air source heat pump, which is just to the top right hand corner of the building there. This scheme shows the proposed mix of surfacing and landscaping. So as you can see, there's an introduction of landscaping along the western and southern perimeter of the site, and a colourised version there to show it better. So including in the development, whereas there is a loss of perimeter vegetation and vegetation category year across the southern perimeter, there is a continuous hedge line proposed to compensate for this, which along the entirety of that north and western perimeter and across the north side of Motts Lane, which runs to the south, measuring 130 metres of continuous native hedge along that southern boundary, with an additional 35 metres ornamental planting within the development side. The lighting layout is shown as this. The application includes 3 different types of lighting, that mounted on the sides of the building, bollard lighting for pedestrian navigation, as well as flood lighting fixed within the service yard area. The elevations include a varied vertical panel design which manages the width and the scale of the development. This is a revised scheme from what was originally submitted, but officers considered that these revisions, which create a vertical emphasis to manage that overall width, is a successful response to officer comments. Members will note that there are flashes of colour. This is orange framing as shown on these plans, and the plans do say that this is to be confirmed, and the committee report reflects that all materials and final finishes can be agreed subject to condition. The 3D visualisation here brings to life all aspects of the elevation. Some provided street scene visuals to provide how this would look at the streetscape. We see the building here. This is its north-easternly corner. This is the elevation looking around the corner of the road. So that's looking in a say westerly direction. And this is the development looking from the back corner of the development where Motts Lane would run just on but off of the site on the right hand side of that image. The current circumstance of the development site is it's an undeveloped area of land within the industrial estate. There's perimeter vegetation which you can see around the side, but otherwise the overall character of Eastways is essentially what is reflected here, a very varied industrial character. This is from another perspective, this is from an elevated vantage. This is taken from a pedestrian footbridge which provides access over the train bridge, but again you can see Eastways in the locality. That's the context towards the southwest of the site. and these are photos from within the application site. So at the moment, as you can see, it's undeveloped, grassland, areas of scrub. As you can see here again, this is a photo taken from Motts Lane, which runs along the south of the site. It's along this elevation that the additional landscaping is proposed to compensate for the loss of Category U trees identified. So wall of text, apologies, but essentially the principal development is acceptable under the adopted local plan. The site falls within the employment policy area and Witham town development boundary. It would provide social and economic benefits through the construction and associated management activities relating to both the development and the operation and the employment opportunities. The scale of the building is considerable, as noted in the officer's report. However, it is commensurate to development elsewhere within the Eastways industrial site, and it's considered that the elevational design effectively manages the bulk and scale of the development. The site is in a sufficiently sustainable area. It has good access to public transport and walking links, and is within proximity to the A12 junction. It provides on-site renewable energy sources such as solar panels and an air source heat pump. The building meets BREEAM very good standards as required by local plan policy, and a condition is recommended to demonstrate that this is met post-build. Access and parking matters are considered acceptable to local plan authority and Essex highways. This includes sufficient cycle and electric vehicle charging parking bays. There are likely to be impacts in terms of additional noise, light and disturbance from the site with the introduction of a B8 use activity, including the service area and associated vehicular trips. Although these impacts are not considered to outweigh the identified policy supports and public benefits, given that the site is designated for a B8 use. Open mosaic habitat on previously developed land, which I'll just refer to now as open mosaic habitat, was identified during the course of this application. This is a highly unique form of priority habitat, which through consultation with place services understand that this is a naturally occurring, but also, if not managed effectively, the habitat will dissipate naturally also. So it requires continual management. Now, as officers has got it to a place where officers considered the scheme acceptable, and this was the only outstanding ecology matter for consideration, this presented officers with the consideration to either refuse the application due to an insufficient off-site compensation scheme, or given that knowingly there is a temporal habitat which will disappear if not appropriately managed, and given that all other aspects were considered acceptable, the right thing to do was considered to negotiate with the developer and place services ecology department and the council's ecology officer to find a appropriate scheme, and this is the compensation strategy recommended off-site within the section 106. Tree removal is noted around the perimeters, and these relate to category C and U tree groups. However, it's considered that acceptable compensation is proposed to offset this loss. Other section 106 matters which have been agreed as heads of terms include open space contributions, as well as a highway travel plan monitoring fee which will be paid to the county council. So taking the details and recommended conditions into account and subject to the 106, officers considered that there are no material considerations that indicate that the decision should be made other in accordance with the development plan, and the recommendation is that it's granted subject to the conditions set out in the report and appendix and the section 106 obligations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jack. Okay, members, who would like to? Councillor Abbott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is right in the middle of a major industrial area, a site which has been vacant for a very long time. I'm very familiar with the site, so it might be expected that at some point an application would come forward. So that is to be expected. And I think, having read the report, officers have sought to reduce the bulking a bit of the building, which originally would have been even bigger. And there are some positive aspects about it. Obviously, the employment itself that it's going to bring to Witham. The solar PV, it's good to see that. Although I think there's a very big roof there. Could have been a lot more. For once, I think the landscaping it's not as good as it could be, but it's better than some we've seen. It's not token, put it that way. It's more substantial than token. But I've got a few concerns and a few questions I'd like to ask, please. One of my main concerns is Motts Lane. Motts Lane is a surviving ancient lane. I don't know how old it is, but it's certainly hundreds of years old. And it connects to the wonderfully named Cutthroat Lane in Witham. And it's part of an ancient network of lanes. Also, they went out to Rivenhall, Rectory Lane connects as well. And they're just left in fragments. Some are protected, some are not. And when the application came forward on the Blue Land, which you showed, there's quite significant damage was done to Motts Lane, removal of trees and part of the bank of Motts Lane itself. So my first question is this development going to actually impinge on Motts Lane itself? Because the building comes very close to it at one point. Secondly, can you identify exactly where the tree losses are on the map? Because I don't think you specified exactly where they were. And thirdly, in terms of the lights, it looks to me like it's fairly well covered. The BDC officers have said they want flat to ground, zero tilt, which is good. And the other two types of lights shown shouldn't have too much spill. However, in the officer report, it says that the developers themselves advocated 2,700k maximum. Can you tell me if the lights are 2,700k maximum? Hours of use restrictions, can you say if that's included anywhere? And also, in terms of Motts Lane, where there are bats, which I don't think have been surveyed in terms of this development, you showed the Isolux plots. Can you identify which Isolux cut across Motts Lane so that we can be told what the lux levels are into Motts Lane? Thank you.
I've got some of the questions, but just so I answer them one after the other, I've got, would Motts Lane be affected, was the first question. Officers have been advised, there's been given no evidence that Motts Lane would suffer any damage as a result of the development. It is built close to Motts Lane, but there's landscaping intervening, and there's no indication that Motts Lane would be impacted by the proposals. I'm not familiar with the circumstances where the adjacent site suffered damage, but I'm not under the impression that Motts Lane would suffer that damage from this development. With regards to the second question, which you have to remind me, apologies.
Where are the trees which are going to be lost?
Yeah, if I can just pull up the plan, so if officers can, members can. Sorry, it's just some technical errors. It's just closed my PDF. Apologies. I'm going to have to do it like this. So, the perimeter vegetation indicated in pink, which is category C, would be removed but replaced by compensatory planting as part of the scheme. And the category U trees are indicated in red along Motts Lane, and they would be removed and they would be compensated by additional planting. The entirety of the Motts Lane perimeter on that side, which continues just off to the left, would be a continuous native hedgerow of 130 metres. Additional ornamental shrub planting is proposed adjoining the service area, and any identified trees, including the maple trees, are not proposed for removal, they're proposed for retention. The third question was with regards to lighting, so I'm going to have to pull the other report up. Apologies, it closed when I switched the plans. I'm going to have to share, just done it again, sorry. So the lux levels cross Motts Lane in this position here, where, as the officer's report does identify, there is a light spillage of illumination across Motts Lane. As regards to bats, the ecology report submitted did identify that there was no habitat for bats and there was no identified bats on Motts Lane. Our ecology officer has stated in their responses that they've reviewed the ecological assessment and the revised documents and have raised no objection to those findings.
Question on Lux as well, 2,700 max.
Yes, there was a question with regards to the lighting levels. I would need to look at the plans again and the officer's report just to clarify. It may well have been a drafting error, but the information is available in the plans, notwithstanding that's what would be approved. So I can look into that separately, but...
There was one other question, I believe, on in terms of the timing restrictions in place. I think there's a condition that relates to that, but if you're talking about actual hours of use, there's not an hours of use restriction, which I think is the thrust of the question.
Okay, well, that does then raise my concerns on two grounds. One, the clearances along the edge of Motts Lane. So you said it's not going to be affected, but the two hedges and the trees on both sides of Motts Lane are part of its character, and you showed a big section which is going to be removed. And what the previous development did was actually take the whole bank out and cut the lane down to surface level. There was nothing left of the original lane, neither the bank nor the trees, so that worries me. And the second thing is, if I'm reading, I can hardly make it out, but if I'm reading those lux contours right, you've got the red contour going across Motts Lane, which is 15 lux. Well, that's 15 times brighter than you should have over the boundary of a development into a potential habitat. I mean, 1 lux I think is too high, but that's what County Council works on. And you've got, I think it could even be higher, but what's looked to me 15 lux. It's way too high.
Yeah, the spillage is addressed within the officer's report, and it is an impact which it hasn't raised any objection with consultees, and whilst a reduced lux level would have been preferred on this occasion, this is a scheme that officers have been provided, and based on the information submitted, based on the policy considerations and based on consultee feedback, it was considered that the benefits of the scheme outweighed the impacts, and accordingly a decision.
We've had many, I won't say any more than this, but we've had many applications come to this committee where the recommendation from the County Council is not to exceed 1 lux horizontal across the boundary, and you've got 15 plus there into a habitat, and it'd be perfectly possible to design the lighting so it didn't do that. So it's up to members what they want to do, but I would say we need an additional condition to get that down to the 1 lux limit.
Can I ask you to comment on the condition?
Sure, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd take the point, Councillor Robert. I mean, that we do have a situation where the ecology officer and environmental health officer don't object, so from the officer perspective, we've not got an objection to reinforce our position. Take your point about the request to lower it. With the condition, the only slight sort of caution I'd urge from the officer perspective is, my understanding on this is that this lighting scheme has been designed to have a minimal impact already, and whilst I'm sure levels could come down again, I don't know quite how far, so I couldn't sit here as a non-technical lighting specialist and guarantee that level could be hit. So the condition from the officer perspective, we would suggest it's slightly open-ended, because I'm not certain how low they can get it. So if you imposed a 1 lux limit and they couldn't hit that, I'm not certain that would meet the test for the condition. That would be the officer view.
Okay, Councillor Schweer.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Overall, I think this is a really good example of what this application, when it first came, and the improvement as a result of consultation between the district council and especially the officers and the developer have resulted in a much improved design and visual effect overall that is much more sustainable for the future of this building, that's going to result in an increase in employment and green skills for Whittam and the area surrounding. So I just wanted to actually, unusually perhaps, say a compliment officers and the developer for coming together and actually forging and going forward for the designs and the quality that we actually want to see across Braintree District Council and with regards to our local plan. So I think basically it's been a really good revision, and I do like the orange in with the grey because I think that does actually help to break up the mass of the grey. But I'd just like to comment further. It is the storage, but as I said, and I think the combination of the PVs, and I agree with Councillor Abbott that it's a shame we couldn't take that opportunity to put more on there, because I think where you use an industrial building with the opportunity to be designed and take the weight and the wind loading of solar panels at that stage, if officers could think in the future, it would be good to see such a large mass being full of the PVs, because I'm certain the developer would encourage that, because if it doesn't actually use or need all of that power, it could be exported, which would help our demand in the area, certainly. But overall, the air source heat pump, I think the landscaping is very good with regards to the native hedging. I think it's been sensitively thought about, and I think once the potential, should planning permission be granted tonight, I think once in a few years' time, once it's grown, it will actually really help with the landscaping, with looking at that massive building there. So I think it'll be very complementary overall. And also the fact that we've got cycles and EV parking and electric charge points, and also the fact that the officers have looked at air quality, and I think that's really important going forward as well with industrial use and what's happening there. So I think the ecology and the environmental reports and everything else that's been involved is actually very good and backs up what we want to achieve in the local plan. So I'm actually very happy to support officers and move officers' recommendation subject to the planning conditions in the section 106. But could we additionally mention, just add about the comment that Councillor Abbott, that if there is an opportunity there to alter the condition on the light spillage there on that corner, to see if the developer would, or it could be re-looked at to reduce that lux. I think we have to be pragmatic about where it is and what it is and the security and everything else, but practically if it could be done so that actually it could benefit not only the wildlife and the landscaping in that area, but also taking into account the industrial use of it. But I think overall it's a really well structured plan, and my compliments again to the developer and our officers for going forward, because I think this is a real good quality that's actually going to come out of the ground of a bare industrial space and change of use. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Swear. Anybody else? Councillor Sprague.
Thank you, Chairman. Given that this is an industrial estate, I think it's an entirely appropriate location for this. And I'm not sure I'd ever go so far as to say that an industrial building looks attractive, but actually I do like the design and the colour scheme. I think it's one of the better ones that we've seen. Also appreciate this application has been in for a while, and I think what does come forward fairly strongly in the report is that the applicants have worked very hard, the officer, to get it to this stage. So yeah, but I agree with Councillor Schweer, they are to be congratulated for that. And obviously there's also an employment gain for the district, which Councillor Abbott mentioned. Pleased to see that there's a section 106 obligation with regards to biodiversity net gain, and that will be off-site, I think, so that's to be welcomed. And all in all, yes, I think this is very good. I would support if we can do or say something about the lighting, to have that looked at without tying the applicant down in any unreasonable way, if there is a possibility of that being
reviewed, then I'd be in favour of that. But overall, yeah, I think this is a very good application. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Spray. Councillor Beavis.
Thank you, Mr Chairman, and I'll keep it quite brief, and I don't disagree with most of the comments from Councillor Swear and Councillor Spray. For me, on that condition, I think it's just the opportunity to put that lighting in. I mean, we're talking quite a big differential in the lux levels, and that recommendation from Essex County Council, I think as a committee member, I'd rather see the word that it was our recommendation. It's just stronger than the word opportunity. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Can I just be clear about whether that change in wording would be appropriate? Thank you, Tim.
Yeah, I think that's understood from all members. So my suggestion would be, I think condition 5, if everyone's in agreement, will be the one that we target, and that we essentially adjust that wording so that rather than approving what's currently there for the lighting scheme, we ask for a revised lighting scheme. And we have a sort of mandate to try and drive those lighting levels down as far as physically possible, without imposing a specific limit, because I'm not certain what limit can be reached. But if members are giving us a clear steer to get that down as far as possible, I think that's achievable from our perspective.
Thank you very much, Tim. Councillor Abbott.
Thank you for letting me come back, Mr Chairman. With LEDs, it's possible to do practically anything now. The colour temperature, the controls, the angles, the brightness, and even just using simple baffles, you can still achieve the same amount of light you want where you need it in your car parking areas and in your working areas without it spilling out beyond. And I think, given that the lighting on a scheme like this is going to be a very small fraction of the investment cost of building this thing, it's not unreasonable to try and to work for these things, to make sure that what they want to light is lit and what we don't want to light is not lit.
Thank you very much. Can I remind members politely that we're under an obligation to allow everybody to have their say, as it were, before we move anything. This is not an attempt to rebuke anybody, but under our current chair, that's how we operate, so I'd like to keep it that way. However, Councillor Swear has moved officer recommendation, and we now need a seconder, if I could ask. Councillor Ritchie.
Chairman,
Happy to.
Sorry.
Could Councillor Shear confirm that he's moving that recommendation with Tim's suggestion for amendment to condition 5?
Yeah, I'm happy to move the recommendation with the condition as suggested by Tim.
Thank you. Now we need a seconder, Chairman.
You've heard that. What's been moved? Could I have a seconder, please? Councillor Ritchie.
Happy to second with the amendment to condition number 5 to reflect the lighting request.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. Okay, that's officer recommendation with the additions and alterations to conditions has been moved and seconded. All those in favour? Thank you. I believe that's unanimous. Thank you very much, members. Okay, we now move to item 5B. We'll wait just briefly whilst Councillor Pell leaves the chamber, as she said she would. Okay, thank you very much. I think we'll proceed. Item 5B on our agenda this evening is application number 23/02494, full, land east of the High Street in Halstead. This evening we have two speakers to speak to us for up to 3 minutes on this application. There will be a tone sound at the end of your 3 minutes, if you could try and keep yourselves to that. The first speaker is Mr. Glenn Langdon. He is chairman of the Housestead First Century Group. And can I invite him to take the chair in front of him, press the magic button and speak to us, please. Thank you.
Good evening. As you're probably aware, we've campaigned for the retention of the Househead air raid shelters and the surrounding land. Many people will have met us, seen our campaigns, protested outside this building and supported us over the last 10 years, for which we give many thanks. Thank you. Thank you. Whilst it is still the case that we want to preserve all of the shelters, also we recognise that a compromise needs to be found where we can preserve as much of this unique history on our doorstep as we possibly can. The 15 underground shelters and 1 overground shelter are in a state of disrepair, and as time passes their situation and integrity continues to deteriorate. Vandalism, antisocial behaviour, flooding and the growth of invasive plants is daily destroying these unique assets, and something needs to change or they will soon be lost forever. We all recognise that this is a complex site with a host of constraints and cannot be approached and developed without recognition of this. This current planning application is the first one that actually recognises the significance of the shelters and the heritage they represent. For 2 years we have been working with Househead New Homes and a specialist archaeological consultant to develop, price and implement a solution for the refurbishment and reinstatement of the shelters, and a sustainable plan for the ongoing management and return of the shelters and surrounding site to the community use. We have developed a heads of terms to secure a long leasehold agreement and financial contribution for the solution and the ongoing management. This also gives us the opportunity to access match funding from the National Lottery Heritage Fund. We believe this is an opportunity to create a heritage park within the centre of our town, preserving our history, creating a safe, open space for wellness, nature and biodiversity, as well as a destination and educational resource that will immerse visitors, schools and community groups in our historic past. Wider to the Heritage Park, it will bring people and commerce to our town, provide a resource for schools and community groups and help residents to further develop a pride in our community. Whilst these new homes proposed are not what we would wish and may not meet all the current regulations for those living around the site, myself included, I live in Factory Terrace, there will be disruption and a loss of privacy. However, whilst Househead 21st Century Group and I would ask that we all take a step back and look at what we could achieve in partnership, requesting that the outcome of this meeting is not a flat refusal, but rather a commitment to continue to engage and work together to find a compromise. The alternative is that the Househead air raid shelters will continue to deteriorate on a daily basis and will soon be lost to history, with the people who built them, the souls that sought safety from bombing in within them, and the community they protect through the worst of time, and the community they protected through the worst of times. Now those shelters are suffering their worst of times. It's time for us to protect them. And if not through this investment, I ask those here present what we propose to do instead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Langdon. Our second speaker this evening is Mr. Liam Boyd, architect on behalf of the applicant. As you know, Mr. Boyd, you have 3 minutes. Please proceed.
Thank you. Good evening, members. We are disappointed to receive a recommendation for refusal. We strongly believe there is considerable merits in the proposals given the clear and significant public benefits that arise from the retention and the refurbishment of the air raid shelters, as you've heard from 21st Century. We note the areas of concern outlined in the committee report. The applicant has been subject of discussion and revision over the course of the past 11 months, and we can see considerable benefit in allowing the applicant further time to revise the scheme to address the objections and secure consent. In this regard, I can confirm we intend to proceed as follows. the removal of apartment blocks 20 to 25 and 26 to 31 and associated car parking areas. Modifications to the remaining houses to address the detailed concerns. This will include consequential revisions of following item 1. Review of pedestrian linkages with site to support accessibility to the visitor centre. Confirmation of the Section 106 obligation to secure the aid rail shelter works before first occupation, and grant the 21st Century Group a 99-year lease, and see the letter dated the 18th of September 23 submitted with the application. This can then allow the considerable heritage benefits of the scheme to be applied in the planning balance. In addition, we suggest that there's an appointment of an independent cost consultant to review and advise the conclusions of the LPA's applicants' experts regarding the construction costs of the development proposals. Provision of tree mitigation details. This can be subject to a condition. We note that there is a mention that there is a tree removed that's covered by a TPO. I'd be grateful if the officer could actually highlight that in their presentation, because we don't believe there's any TPO trees being affected. The Parish Council also do not object to our application. We note the remaining reason for the reason on the development plan compliance. We draw your attention to section 4.2.4 of our DAS, which demonstrates the scheme will not prejudice any further development in the wider site. So we request that this application be deferred so we can address these issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Boyd. This evening, the presentation by the officers will be provided by Melanie.
Good evening, members. Just coming back on a couple of the points there that were raised in the public speaking time. I've just refreshed my memory very quickly looking through the section within the committee report regarding landscaping and trees, and I'm not aware that there is mention of a TPO tree being removed. There are various concerns in there that are set out on page 86 and 87 if members are interested and want to reread those sections, but I can't see any specific reference to a protected tree being removed. And I just wanted to come back on one point of one of the suggestions within Mr. Boyd's statement in terms of the appointment of an independent costs consultant. I just wanted to make members aware that the independent expert that was appointed by the LPA is completely independent of the LPA. The services were paid for by the applicant, so those fees were met by the applicant. So they are an employee of the council. They are completely independent of the council. And I just wanted to clarify that point for members. So turning to the presentation, some members may well be aware of the site. They've maybe sat on committee for a while when it's come in its various forms over the years. So the application before you this evening is for 31 residential units with associated car parking, amenity areas, external works with the retention of 10 air raid shelters and the Warden's Hut, and then the use of 2 of the retained shelters as a World War II experience, and the use of the Warden's Hut as a visitor centre, retail area and cafe. So this first slide here shows you the location of the site, which I'm sure many of you will be aware of in terms of its fairly central position within the town of Halstead. We've got the access road, so a vehicular access to the site would come along St Andrews Road, which runs off of Parsonage Street. The main body of the site then has Factory Lane East to the south, with Factory Terrace and Vicarage Meadow to the south. We've then got an area which is undeveloped but forms part of the wider allocation that sits behind the existing properties on the High Street, and then to the north we've got the name is gone. There's a care home here, and I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head. And then we have then got properties off of Parsonage Street that then back onto the northern part of the site. I thought this would be useful to show members an aerial photograph of the site. So just to put it in context, St Andrews Road runs along here. This is the playing field for the nearby school. We've got Factory Terrace along here with their back gardens. This is Vicarage Meadow. Here to the south is the car park that belongs to the co-op, and then we've got the centre, which is the shopping centre off of the centre, just to the north here, and then this is the application site here. This plan just shows you the constraints to do with the application site. So the yellow lines is the marking for the conservation area. So you can see that there's a small area of conservation area here which runs around Vicarage Meadow, and then the vast majority of the high street sits within the conservation area, and then it kind of it goes back in various depths depending on the heritage asset. So Factory Terrace is included within the conservation area, and then we go as far as the Congregational Church is also being included within the conservation area. You can also see on here the TPO, the protected tree, which is here, and the blue markings are Grade 2 listed buildings. So you can see that the site on 3 sides is surrounded by listed buildings. This next slide shows you the proposed site location plan. As I mentioned before, the land to the left-hand side here and the application site all falls within a larger site allocation, and the relevant policy within the local adopted plan is LPP 23. That's set out in detail within the agenda on pages 77 and 78. If members want to turn to that. I'm remembering you haven't got paper copies anymore, but that specifically is it's a comprehensive development area policy, and it makes reference to the site coming forward to include new homes, retail, commercial space, open space and community uses, and then there is a bullet point list of issues that do need to be addressed, but I just wanted to draw members' attention to that policy as it's a key one for this site that's specific to this site and nowhere else within the district. So turning to the layout plan, you can see that vehicular access, as I said, comes off of to the right hand side here from St Andrews Road, runs round the main perimeter block, and then this is the Warden's Hut that would be turned into the visitor centre with its own car parking area, and then these 3 larger blocks at the bottom of the site are the blocks of flats that are proposed. This plan here shows the tree protection. The TPO tree is actually this one here. So you can see that there is a fair amount of work proposed in terms of the driveway to serve the flats and also the car parking for the visitor centre that would sit within the RPA, which is that blue hatched area in terms of where there would be some protection. It also then shows you the other, as the aerial photograph showed, it's a very well treed site, fairly overgrown as well when I last visited, and so you can see on here that there are a number of trees that will be removed, but as set out within the officer report, because of the allocation, officers have accepted that there will have to be some tree removal for the site to come forward, and it's just ensuring that the most special trees and landscaping is kept on the site. This last plan here shows you the landscape strategy that's been put forward. So you can see here that there is landscaping that's been proposed to be put back in. So we've got the street trees either side along this first road in, along the top and round the side. So there is some compensatory planting that is proposed, and then along with then other shrub planting proposed. It's fairly detailed, that plan, but it was just to give you an indication that there is some replacement planting is proposed, and the requirement of then street trees is then shown there on that plan. The next few slides just show sections through of the site, and these are really, I think, quite useful for members to be able to see the change in levels across the site. So this shows you the 4 dwellings as you first would enter the site, and would be on your left-hand side running down to the block of flats. This is centrally through the site, so this is the terrace of 5 properties with the Undercroft garage parking. Again, this is then running north to south through the site with the linked detached properties. You can see the section through of the terrace of 5 dropping down to one of the blocks of flats that would sit behind Factory Terrace. Then this is an interesting drawing in terms of even within an individual property you can see the change in levels from front to back of these 2 properties. The next slides won't linger on too long, as they are just to show you the elevations that are proposed, just to give you an idea of the appearance of what's being proposed. So these are units 5 and 6 and 12 and 13. And then these are units 7 to 11, so this is the block of 5 in the centre of the site. We've then got, this is unit 14, and then 15 and 17. And then we then turn to the flats, so this is 18 and 19 with the Undercroft car parking, flats 20 to 25, and then flats 26 to 31. The next 2 slides show the arrangements for the visitor centre. So you can see within this floor layout plan, there will be a retail area, a cafe servery area, and a display area, and then WCs provided within the site. This then shows you the appearance of the building, and you can see the ramp that's been provided because of those change in levels across the site. The next slides show photographs, which the site's fairly large, so there are quite a lot of photographs, but I'll talk you through them. So these 2 photographs are views of the site from the centre. These are views from the Co-op car park. So the site sits behind here, Factory Terrace, and then also then sits behind these properties in Vicarage Meadow. We can then, these are the site again is behind here, the properties in Vicarage Meadow, and this photograph looks up Vicarage Meadow, and so the development will be where these trees are at the moment. These photographs are from St Andrews Road, Simmons Court. There we go. That's what it was. That's what the care home was called. So you can just see in this top photograph here, this is Simmons Court with then Congregational House in the background and part of the application site. This photograph here is looking straight onto the access point from St Andrews Road. Some couple more photographs. This one is looking towards Parsonage Street on St Andrews Road, and then this is a longer shot of the access, the only vehicular access into the site from St Andrews Road. These photographs are taken from the Congregational House to the north, looking at the site beyond. The next few photographs are within the site, so these are actually of the air raid shelters themselves. I can't claim to be brave enough to have taken that one. That was the heritage officer. He was braver than me going in there. And then these 2 photographs here of the warden's hut. So by way of a summary, this is a full planning application for 31 residential units, including car parking and amenity areas. The site is allocated for redevelopment within the Houstead Town Centre. It is highly constrained, contains protected trees and partly within the conservation area, and is surrounded by listed buildings. Officers consider that there's insufficient information been submitted regarding the long-term maintenance and management of the retained air raid shelters. There's also been a failure to provide a suitable layout for the site which considers the comprehensive redevelopment. Officers consider there's a poor amenity for future and existing occupiers, unacceptable design and insufficient car parking provision, lack of pedestrian links back into the town centre, the lack of specialist tree information, and I think most importantly is the lack of affordable housing that has been proposed. Therefore, officers have concluded that the public benefits proposed by the application would not outweigh the harm indicated above on the earlier slide, and that the recommendation is that planning permission be refused. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mel. Members, I'll take Councillor Fink and then Councillor Beavis, if I may.
Thank you, Chair. As you know, this has been a long saga. I think it was first, I was first aware of it when I got onto Housestead Town Council in 1979, which is quite a long time ago. And of all the plans that have been put forward so far, I think this is the best plan by far. It's supported by Housestead 21st Century Group. It retains nearly all the air raid shelters, the historic assets. It converts the Warden's Hut to a heritage centre and a cafe, providing a magnificent new facility for the centre of Housestead. Some of the objections that have been put forward, I think, could be addressed by further discussions between the developers and the officers. For example, the long-term maintenance plan for the air raid shelters, the management arrangements for the cafe and the information centre and the World War II experience. I think all those things could be discussed further, and we could come to a conclusion on those. But it's a highly sensitive site next to Housestead Town Centre. It's next to the conservation area, many listed buildings, etc. And therefore it's very important that the design and the layout are got right. And I know that's the big reservation that we've got about this proposal. Now, some of this, I think, was addressed by the architect in his presentation. The design and the layout and the arboricultural aspects, I think, do need further work. But I think we could think that certainly he has put forward some changes already, and we could perhaps foresee certain discussions taking place between the officers and the developers to provide further changes which would bring about a solution. I think everybody in Housestead wants to see this come to a conclusion. It's gone on for far, far too long. Decades and decades have gone past. Now, proposals come forward which, as I say, is better than we've had before. It's not perfect. Maybe there isn't a perfect solution. But we would like to see the site developed. We think it would be an asset to Housestead, and we think we can find a solution which is acceptable to all parties. And maybe if there was a deferral to allow further consultation and discussion to take place, maybe we could achieve a compromise or a solution which is acceptable. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Fink. And Councillor Beavis, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I would echo all of that. Actually, I can't claim to have been looking at the plan since 1979, but I think myself and Councillor Spray can probably say since 2003, when we became members of the Housestead Area Committee. We were looking at this piece of land back then, and at that stage, the biggest issue we actually had was all of the pieces of land for the properties that run along the high street. We were being told at that stage that the solicitors were working on all the individual leases, all the individual pockets of land to make sure that this could all happen. The point I'm making is that so much time, money and resource has been spent looking at this site. What I'm finding a little bit hard to understand, and it really is not a criticism, it really is not, and I understand the framework of the forums that we have, but why on earth did we not bring this to a forum? And actually I would support a deferral, but actually had the forum, it would have worked so much better. I wanted to thank the Housestead 21st Century Group And I know the answer to that, but the point I want to make is maybe we need to look at the forum then, because something like this would have fitted it perfectly well. It's not just the number of properties, it's the community benefit, the huge community benefit to Housestead, and the longevity that we have been looking at this site, and the amount of money we must have spent as an authority and lawyers working on behalf of everybody else. And I remember the bank building, which I think now as a funeral directors is a really good example. I remember the cost of that one at the time. It isn't a conservation area. We have got the Constitutional Hall. It's right in the heart of Courtauld, this is. It's right in the heart of Courtauld site. And you've got all of those, the richness of the Courtauld buildings around. And so it is so sensitive. And for all of those reasons as well, added into the mix, we're never going to sort it out at this planning committee. It's completely clear. It's far too much for us to even consider at the planet. It's just far too much. I can't. I mean, I would love to hear the views of all the other members. I sincerely appreciate the applicant for bringing this forward, and the fact we've now got Housestead 21st Century Group saying yes, there's something at long last that we can all work together on. As Councillor Thinken said, it isn't perfect, but oh my golly gosh, we have come such a long way. And from my point of view as a councillor looking at this for so many years, and actually pretty much knowing the place like the back of my hand, I was the county councillor for 4 years, I've been brought up in the area, I just know it so well. I would really just hate to see this disappear again until another 10 years. It's just such an opportunity. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Melanie.
I just wanted to come back on the point that Councillor Beavis made about the lots of different landowners, and that, as far as my understanding, is still the case. So the comprehensive redevelopment area is larger than the Red Line application site, and it's so when you're looking at the site to the left-hand side, so between the site and the backs of those properties on the high street, as far as my understanding is, there are still a number of landowners that either haven't clubbed together or whatever. I don't know how you kind of knock their heads together to sort of come together, but that is part of the concerns that's set out within the officer report, is that this application only deals with sort of 2/3 of the allocation, and that remaining third hasn't been dealt with. Now, whether or not there needs to be a change to the allocation, maybe that's something for a different committee to decide. But there is, as far as my understanding, still that issue in terms of the number of landowners on that kind of that section behind the high street.
Thank you, Melanie. Can we turn to Councillor Ritchie, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I find myself agreeing with much of what Councillor Finken has said this evening, and this is my third iteration of being a member of this committee for the past 8 years, and I too think that so far this is the best one that we have had to date. And it's great that Mr. Langdon has supported this through his group Century 21. But what we mustn't lose sight of is that the planning process has to be front and centre of any work or plan to maintain those air raid shelters as part of the application. And as clearly set out by Mel, there's a number of areas where this application isn't quite right just yet. Having said that, I don't think it would take too much to get it to a point whereby it could be right. I think there's too much to address for it to be deferred. A deferral can pick up some small procedural items that could be looked at as part of a deferral. I think there is too much that needs to be changed on this application for us to consider a deferral this evening. I was just curious as to whether or not the applicant had been involved in any kind of pre-application discussions with officers. So I'm sure they would have had some valid and quantifiable advice around what needed to be done to have met the threshold that would have got to the benchmark where we could consider this application for approval this evening. But like I said, and as Councillor Finken has said, and as a member who grew up in Housestead, schooled in Housestead, ran around those air raid shelters when I probably wasn't supposed to, as part of growing up as a young child, this area is crying out for a development. And it's, like I said, it is great to see one of the better applications come before us this evening. And I look forward to hopefully seeing another application in the not too distant future, because it would be a shame if we were waiting for another 5-10 years for this to come forward again. But I think if we can address the outstanding issues of the items that have been brought forward tonight, including ones around the space standards, etc., and the layout and how the housing is set out, including affordable housing, I think this committee would be in a much better position to be able to progress something forward. I'll leave it at that for now. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Rishi. Councillor Bowes-Flint.
Thank you. I suppose I'm going to be able to claim fame to sitting through every single one of these applications over the years, and commend Housing 21 as well, because we have had some quite strong objections from them in the previous applications and previous years. I don't necessarily disagree with what Councillor Finken has said, but what concerns me are that comments have been made by members about helping the community and everything, but nothing's been mentioned about the lack of affordable housing on this site. Can I ask officers, are they aware of the reason why there is no affordable housing being put forward on this site, please? Thank you.
Melanie.
Yeah, so there is a section within the committee report, and you'll see that the applicants put forward 3 reports to demonstrate viability issues in terms of why affordable housing wasn't being provided on site, or if not on site in lieu of that with a commuted sum. That information was assessed 3 times by an independent viability assessor, and on each occasion his conclusion was that the site was viable, and therefore because the affordable housing wasn't being provided, we then had to reach the conclusion that it wasn't compliant with the relevant policy from the local plan. Thank you, that's all I needed to hear. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Melanie. We'd like to move to Councillor Spray, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, as has already been said, I think those of us who are on the planning committee have been around a while would love to see nothing more than an application come forward with supportive officers and that we could get to grips with. It is a site that really does need something. And I also congratulate the 21st Century Group on their unflagging determination to try and get something suitable here. And it must be extremely frustrating for them and for the town council that, you know, we haven't managed to achieve anything on this site yet. It is a really difficult site. You know, there's the access, and I don't think it would matter whether we were talking about housing. I think we've had a supermarket proposed at least once. It didn't matter what it was, the access is always going to be a bit difficult. You've got the number of listed buildings surrounding it, so whatever you do on the site has got to not impact listed buildings. And then there are the air raid shelters, which are of historic importance. So it is, I think it's probably one of the trickiest sites we've got in the district to find something suitable for. I don't disagree that what we have before us this evening is probably the best effort so far, but for me there is too much to address here for a deferral to be suitable. I think if you were talking about 2 or 3 sort of minor issues, then yes, that might be acceptable, but I think, as Councillor Ritchie said, you've got some major problems going on here, not least the affordable housing, which Councillor Bowles-Flint has just talked about, and I think that's too much to overcome by deferring it and going back for discussions. I'm afraid, very much for me, it's back to the drawing board, but I do feel we're edging closer, but I accept it's extremely frustrating. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Spray. Does anybody else wish to speak? Okay, that being the case, I would like to ask if anybody wishes to move any particular. Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. Having considered all the comments this evening is with a tinge of regret, but I am happy to support officers' recommendations to refuse this application this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. Do we have a seconder for that proposition? Thank you, Councillor
I'll
Spray.
second that. Thank you.
Heard that proposal, and it has been seconded. Can I ask all those in favour to raise their hand, please? Thank you very much, members.
Do we need to take votes against?
I'd like to votes against and abstentions, please, too. Thank you, members. That application has been refused. We now move to item 5C on our agenda. Item 5C is application number 24/01515HH and pertains to number 25 Church Street, Colne Engane. If I could ask anybody who wants to leave quietly now, that would be helpful. Thank you very much for your attendance. We have no speakers on this item, and therefore I'd like to turn to and welcome Rory Hayhurst on his first appearance here, presenting for the officers. And so, Rory, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. This is a householder application for the extension of vehicular access and the installation of the dropped curb at 25 Church Street, Colne Engane. This application is brought to committee as a result of the applicant being a member of staff at BDC. You can see here the location plan and the existing site plan. The property is on Church Street in the centre of Colne Engane, which is a classified road, hence the need for planning permission for the dropped curb. You'll also notice it's quite close to the church. It's not within the conservation area and it's not considered within the immediate setting as a result of quite a few trees here, and there's a fair distance in between. This is the existing driveway plan, so the proposals are limited to the front of the site. You can see the existing arrangement here shows one off-street parking space, the dropped curb and a small raised garden on this side. The proposal is to add a second off-street parking space, extending the dropped curb across the front. This does include the removal of the raised garden. However, that and the installation of the permeable pavers is considered permitted development, so it's not for consideration within this planning application. The elevations are very similar. The only change is that removal of the raised garden at the front. It's not considered that the impact of the drop curb will be in any way significant to the street scene. The site photos, so this shows the current arrangement of the site. Half of it is the parking space, and the other half is the raised garden. You can see the dropped curb is not in the best of states at the moment, so this upgrade may be good. The adjoining neighbour, similar arrangement, one parking space and the raised garden. You can also see how close it is to Church Street itself, so there's not much space for on-street parking. The neighbours to the west, slightly different properties, larger and detached. They also have dropped curbs with larger driveways. So in summary, the application site is located within the development boundary for Colne Engane, where the principle of residential alterations is acceptable. It's been considered acceptable with respect to highway safety and off-street parking provision. There's been no objections from the Highways Authority. They've recommended 2 conditions, one of which has been placed on the decision notice relating to the particulars of the dropped curb. The other was relating to the use of permeable paving and unbound material, which is just included in the approved plans condition. There would be no unacceptable impact upon neighbouring residential amenity as the nature of the proposal, and it's not considered there'd be a harmful impact upon the identity of the dwelling or the character and appearance of the area. The proposal therefore complies with all relevant policies within the local plan. the recommendation for members tonight is that planning permission be granted. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rory. Members? Thank you. Councillor Spray.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for your presentation, Rory. Welcome to Planning Committee. This is in my ward. I know the properties along there very well. I think this is a perfectly reasonable request. I can't see there'd be any adverse impact on the neighbouring properties. And actually, as you say, I think it will improve the overall look of the frontage there. So I fully support it. I won't move anything for the moment, but I absolutely support the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Spray. Anybody else?
Well, in that case, Chairman, I will move officer's recommendation for approval.
Thank you. Can we have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. Okay, members, you've heard officer's recommendation be proposed and seconded. Can I ask all of those in favour to raise their hand, please? Thank you very much, members. That appears to be unanimous. That concludes our planning applications for this evening. I'd like to thank very much indeed our officers for their excellent reports this evening. The remaining item on the agenda is item 6, and there is no business under this item, and therefore at 8:30 I close this meeting of Braintree District Council Planning Committee. Thank you.